What we're going to talk about today is the basics of starting to animate objects in Blender, specifically using keyframes. It's a little different than Flash. Actually, not just a little different. It's a lot different than Flash. But in all honesty, kind of like it better, you know, myself. But if you're just used to the whole Adobe thing and how Adobe works and the timelines and stuff like that, this is going to seem a little different. I mean, it still has a timeline and everything like that, but it is going to be a little different. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're just going to animate. I'm going to animate two objects coming together. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move my square right out to the edge of the grid. Okay, like that. Oh, and I want it to move up. So what I just did there was I used the number keyboard. 5 gets rid of the perspective, if you remember, okay? And then 1 sent me down to the side. 3 would send me to this side. 7 sends me to the top, okay? And then you can also rotate with 2 or 8, okay, to kind of spin around. It's pretty cool. So now what I'm going to do, remember, Option allows you to swivel around, and Option Shift you can drag side to side. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to add another object. I'm just going to do a sphere, just so that you can see the differences. And I'm going to do something similar here. Lift it up so that it looks like it's on the floor here. And bring it all the way over here. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now you can see we've got this. You'll notice one of the things that I've done is, this is just kind of an aside, but you see how whenever I select an object, it rotates around that object and that object stays in place? One of the things that you can do to set that is under the user preferences here under interface, I have rotate around selection, which I really like having that selected. Okay, so anyway, so let's just animate. We're going to have these two objects collide in the middle. Now, just to kind of go over a basic principle here, which Flash kind of does for you, but Blender does not. Excuse me. In order to have motion in an animation, you need a keyframe, right? Okay. But really, in order for it to go from point A to point B, how many keyframes do you actually need? A minimum of, sorry?
24.
You're thinking of frames per second. Keyframes. Keyframes. Rob? 2. You need one at the beginning of the motion and one at the end of the motion. Okay? And then the computer does all the in-between frames for you. Okay? In Flash, as soon as you plunk something down onto a layer, okay, it puts a keyframe down there at 0 or 1, actually frame 1 for you. Blender does not do that. So here's what's interesting with Blender. I'm going to make a mistake. If I set, so down here I have my, this is my timeline, and again this is all in frames, just like you're used to. So if I set the time to 60 here, okay, the way you add a keyframe for an object is you just hit the I key on the keyboard, and then this drop-down menu is going to come in here, and you want to add one. Most of the time, you're going to want to add a keyframe that's location, rotation, and scale. You want both. Not always, but for now, with the simple stuff, we're going to add all the above. You can actually add keyframes for only 1 or 2. But we're going to, I almost always add them for 1. And then if you have to, you can go back and you can delete the keyframes for one of those properties if you want to. So I'm going to insert a keyframe here, but first I'm going to move it, okay? Let me get out of here. So I'm going to move it, and then I'm going to insert a keyframe for location, rotation, and scale. And then I'm going to scrub the timeline, and look, nothing happened. And why nothing happened? Because, sorry? Well, I moved it first, yes, kind of, sort of. Most importantly, because in Blender actually it doesn't matter whether you move it first or create it, In fact, you have to move it first in Blender. I didn't create a keyframe at 1. See? I didn't create a keyframe at 1, so I only have one keyframe, so it's not moving anywhere. So let's undo. So let's get, okay, so now we're back to our position. I'm going to go to 1 here. I'm going to insert a location, rotation, scale keyframe. Then I'll go forward to, say, 80 here. Move my object right to the center. Okay, and I can, whoops, I can make sure that it's right in the center there or close to by moving my view. And then I will hit I a second time. And notice down here, we've got a little yellow line where that keyframe is. So I hit I a second time, location, rotation, and scale. And now you can see I've got 2 yellow lines here, and our cube is moving forward. Nice and simply. So now, let's do the same thing with our sphere. So I'm going to right-click on the sphere to select it. Now notice what happens on the timeline. The little yellow lines for my cube went away. This is another very important difference between, say, Flash and Blender, and a lot of 3D, most 3D animations actually work this way, and that is that you do not see the keyframes for all the objects inherently, at least not in this view. We can change that, and I'm going to show you an easy way to do that. But first, I'm going to go through the exact same principle or process here. So hit the I key, insert a keyframe, location, rotation, scale, and then we're going to go to 80. I'm going to move my sphere. We're going to do a little collision here, so let's go to 3. Just want it touching. I don't want it to go inside the object. I just want them to look like they touch. And I'm going to hit the I key again, location, rotation, and scale. So now you can see that they're both moving. Okay, so now let's have them bounce back. So I'm going to go forward another 10 frames or so. I'm going to move this sphere back a little bit, and I'm going to insert another keyframe. Insert, location, rotation, and scale. And then we'll take the cube, and I'll do the exact same thing, make it move back a little bit, and insert, location, rotation, and scale. Boom. Now we've got a real simple animation. Boom, like that. Okay? Now what's interesting is, and we can play it here, notice something that we call ease in, ease out. Watch the velocity of our objects here, okay? They start out slow, they accelerate, and then as they come to the second keyframe at 80, they start to slow down, and then when they hit, they start to accelerate and then slow down again. See that? We call this ease in, ease out. It's a good thing to have, okay, in many cases, but in this case, maybe not so much, right? Because if objects were rolling or sliding across a surface and were going to hit each other, they don't slow down before they hit each other. Not unless it's a car and somebody sees that they're going to hit something and then they start to hit the brakes, right? But when it's just two inanimate objects, they continue at their velocity. So what we're going to do is we're going to move to a different view when you start to animate objects. So I'm going to go up here to where it says default. I'm going to click, and I'm going to choose the animation setting. And the animation setting changes our view somewhat. Not somewhat, it changes our view a lot. Gone are the modeling tools on the left here. And the right actually shows us our camera view here. Okay? And so it divides this into 3. We still have our timeline down here. But then we have these 2 windows here. These 2 windows are really great. This window right here is called the DopeSheet. I'm not exactly sure why somebody decided to call it the DopeSheet, but it's called the DopeSheet. And the DopeSheet is literally a breakdown of all the animation things that you have happening in your scene. And so let's take a look. I'm gonna close the sphere for a second. We're just going to open up the cube. So here I've got the cube. And then underneath that, if you open up the cube, you see cube action. And you see these keyframes here. Now if I right-click on one of these keyframes and I just start dragging it, you'll notice that the keyframe underneath it moves as well. However, if I open this up, location, rotation, scale, now each one of the actions that happens, it's changing its position in X, Y, Z axes. It's rotating along the X, Y, and Z axes of the object itself, and its scale, X, Y, Z. Those are all keyframed. Now there really isn't any animation here. I didn't rotate the object. I didn't scale the object, okay? So those are almost useless. But I did change its location. And if I zoom in by scrolling, okay, what you can see is this yellow bar here means no change. But between these two keyframes, the Y location, that's the direction that I moved the cube in, and so there is a change. Notice here, same thing, from the first keyframe to the second keyframe, I've actually moved it along the Y, so there's a change, but these didn't change at all. So it's kind of showing me that these were empty keyframes. You could trash them if you wanted to, whatever. You can also lock them. See that? Now I can't accidentally bump them or change them. It's kind of cool. So here you have a list of all your keyframes, all the animations, exactly what's going on. It's nice. It shows you everything you might need to know. And we can do the same thing in the sphere. Open up location, rotation, and again we're moving in the y-axis. If I move them side to side on the x-axis, then we would see the line here go away, or in the z-axis or whatever. You get the idea. Okay, so now, down here, we have what we call the FCurve Editor. The FCurve Editor is really cool. When you select an object, it's going to show you your actions, just like in the DopeSheet. But here, it's going to show you those animations, basically. By the way, you move side to side in the view, before I go any further, the exact same way that you move side to side over here in the user view. You hold the Option and the Shift key down, and it allows you to slide around here. The scroll wheel zooms in, just like it does in the user view. So take a look at what we've got here. This is a curve that represents the change in Y. And notice I can turn off everything else, okay, so that I don't see any of the other things that are changing. Okay? So now I only see this. What do you think this curve is telling about my velocity right here if I click on that point? What is that showing me? It's showing the ease in, ease out that I told you about. It's showing you that it starts out slow, it accelerates into its position, and then before it reaches its position, it starts to slow down. So what we want to do is we want to make this collision be more violent, be a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to right-click to select the handle here, and I'm going to drag. Now one of the things is once you start dragging, you can let go of the button. It doesn't actually let go of the handle until you left-click. So I'm going to put that handle as close to the dot as possible, and then you can zoom in here by the, even more. And then on the way out, I don't want it to start slowly. I want it to start immediately bouncing back, because again, we want it to be a violent sort of collision. Left click. Okay. Now you can see the acceleration is going to start slowly, but it's going to reach its speed, and then when they collide, it's going to immediately bounce back, and then it's going to slow down as it reaches the third keyframe. Let's see what it looks like when we play it. Okay? So I'll make these a little smaller. And let's go back to 0 here and hit the play. That looks a little bit more natural, doesn't it? Try it again. See, it's slowly accelerating, and then boom. Now, if I want it to accelerate a little faster in the beginning, well, then the principle's still just exactly the same. I'm going to go over here, I right-click on this point, then I right-click and start dragging this, maybe not all the way to the point, but somewhere around here. So it's going to accelerate a little bit, but not too much. Let's hit play again. So now we need to do the same thing to the sphere because the sphere is slowing down too much. So I'll right-click on that. Notice the FCurve Editor changes, and now you've got this, the sphere is here. And I will change my velocity here like that, and go and do the same thing here at the top of the curve, which is the beginning of the animation, just like I did the other. So now let's take a look at what we've got here, very simplified animation. They're accelerating in, they hit each other, and they bounce back. Wahoo. Now, one of the things that you can also do, just like in Flash, is I can alter a keyframe. So if I want to, I can click on my cube here, and I can go back to 100, and notice, look right here, see this? Watch what happens when I get on the keyframe. It's going to change colors. It's really important to make sure you're on the keyframe, not one off, because if you do that, you'll create a whole new keyframe, and then you could cause yourself lots of problems. In fact, let's do that on purpose. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to rotate my cube just a little bit. So I'm going to go to my rotate manipulator, and I'm going to rotate it like when it collided, it kind of slid a little sideways because no collision is perfect. And I'm going to insert a keyframe. Now if I do that, watch the animation, because what I've done, and you really can't tell here, but you can see here, I actually have two lines next to each other. Now they're so close that it doesn't even really show up in the DopeSheet or anything like that, but they're there. And so watch what happens as I play this animation again back from the beginning. Okay, and then it does a one-frame rotate, which looks really awkward. Yeah, so we want it to start rotating from here, and then slowly rotate when it gets to here, not all of a sudden rotate like that. So I'm going to delete this keyframe here, which you can do, let's see, I think that's, yeah, delete keyframe, which is right here, the little key with a line through it. You can also go into the DopeSheet here, right-click on that, hit the X key for delete, and delete it that way too. So now I don't have that keyframe anymore. Now notice that goes away. Now make sure I'm back on the old keyframe that I wanted it to be on. Rotate it. And unlike some programs, I have to reinsert the keyframe. So hit I again, location, rotation, scale. And now let's play our animation from there. Boing. See? Nice and simple. Okay? So we've got a real basic little bounce, and there we go. Obviously, the sphere is not rolling like a ball would or any, I'm not getting into all that yet, but I do want you to understand some of the principles. So it's in some ways, it's very similar to tweening with Flash. You have keyframes. The computer does the frames in between for you, just like Flash does. This is basically like a motion tween, and that's basically all it has. It doesn't have the, it does have shape tweens essentially, but we're not going to worry about that. It's basically just got motion tweens for everything. We'll just leave it there. That's the best thing I can say. But the difference is if you want to start really controlling your motions and you want to start editing them so that they're more natural, you want to change from the default view to the animation view so that you get the DopeSheet and the FCurve Editor. The FCurve Editor helps you to animate velocities, okay, essentially, and the DopeSheet will help you see your keyframes, delete, move your keyframes, and so on and so forth. So, for instance, let's say I felt like this was a little slow. I wanted them to hit each other a little fast. My option there is to bring the keyframe from 80 in to, say, 60. So it'd be really easy, actually, to do that with our with our DopeSheet. All I have to do is right-click here and hold the Shift key down and right-click on the cube, and then start to drag them with the right. Whoops. Okay, let's try this again. So I'm going to right-click, then Shift right-click, and start to drag. And it doesn't seem to want to help me do that, so I'll have to do them separately. So I'll move it to 60. And then I'll right-click, and I'll move the other one to 60. And there we go. So now they're both still synchronized. They still hit at the same time, but now the velocity has changed, and it's made it a lot faster. Yeah, that looks a little more natural. Now, you can do that with the FCurve Editor, but you know what? I recommend doing it with the DopeSheet. It's a lot easier. The FCurve Editor, there's a lot of points in there. You can drag points. But here's the other problem. If you click on a point and you move it up or down, you can actually adjust the position of your object with the FCurve Editor. Because the FCurve Editor, this is a graph. This is basically a graph of your X and Y position. So watch what happens here. I'm going to screw this up on purpose. So I'm going to go in here to the FCurve Editor. I'm going to right-click on this point. And if I click and drag, whoops. If I click and drag on the point itself, notice that I am now adjusting the position of the cube in X and Y space. I don't like using the FCurve Editor to do that myself. So you be careful of the FCurve Editor, because if you click on the point itself, now you're not just altering the velocity in and out of a point, but you are actually altering the position of your object, which does alter the velocity, right? But it also, if you've got the position set really nicely where you want it, you can really screw that up, okay? So that's what the DopeSheet and the Curve Editor are for. That's a real basic setup on how to animate with Blender. It's obviously can get a lot more complicated than that. And we'll start talking about cameras and animating cameras. By the way, cameras, you edit them basically just like any other object, because that's always a question I get right now is, I want to animate the camera. Great. Keyframe it. It keyframes just like anything else. Rotation, location, there's all sorts of stuff you can do with the cameras, but essentially it's just an object in space exactly like all the others. Any questions? All righty.